Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Mythic Cast. I am your host, Spencer, and I am joined by a man that I've wanted to talk to about Magic privately for years. For years and years. I am joined by the Smitty. Jesse,
How's
what
it
is up,
going?
dude?
How's it going, Spencer? Thanks for having me on, man, and congrats on starting a new endeavor.
Dude, I'm excited on this one. This is one that has been occupying a lot of my mental energy for the last couple of weeks, and I'm really excited to have you on. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, you know what? I've been the first on yours and the KYT podcast now. I'm just lucky, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's there's no doubt in my mind that you are one that deserves it. You're one that for me has never gotten enough credit for their contributions to the Magic community. So I'm excited to have you on.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate that.
So, before we get started, why don't we talk about you just a little bit? So you are a old school deck brewer for a lot of our listeners. As Magic has boomed, it doesn't feel like you're old school, right? Because like you and I have
No,
been
it
playing that
does.
whole time. But if you ask people what Millblade is, or what or what, I mean, you were the birthing pod guy when that card was spoiled. There was
Yeah,
nobody working
dude.
harder on birthing pod decks than you. And to our listeners, they're like, "What's that? That's a ban card in Modern."
Yeah, it is, dude. It's broken. It always was, dude. How did we? I mean, like, there were so many free cards back then, and it's crazy because, like, you think there's these thousands and thousands and thousands of people playing Magic, and sometimes it's like odd that I find something that someone doesn't. But it's just like it's just like, why wouldn't you be using this card that's free?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, you
not free, but like the mana is just like it's just way undercosted,
yeah.
and you can, yeah,
You
whatever,
almost
you know
got
how it is.
Cobblade not banned, man. Like you were working on this so hard. People started picking it up at SEGs. I think you started on Green White or something. But people were
Yeah,
working on birthing pod decks because of you, and almost made it so Cobblade stayed in the metagame.
yeah. I mean, it should have, dude. That was the best time. It really was. They were. Look at the power level of those cards. Like, look at like a card like Geralf's Messengers, like a 3 mana 3/2 that deals damage when he comes into play, but then when he dies, he comes back and does it again. Like, those cards like don't exist for 3 mana. Like, we have 3 mana 4/4 trample is like our best 3 drop right now.
Yeah,
Anyways, the card, I loved it back then. It was
yeah.
so money, dude. And people hated Cobblade because it dominated, but there were ways to beat it,
It
dude.
was
There
it
were
was
ways to
funny.
beat it.
Somebody posted on Twitter a screenshot of a Twin Blade list. It was the last list to win an SCG before Cobblade got banned, and they were like, "There are 13 banned cards in Modern in this
Yeah,
deck:
dude.
Ponder,
Uh,
Preordained, Gataxian Probe, Splinter Twin, Stoneforge Mystic."
right?
It was nuts.
Unbelievable, dude. Unbelievable time. But it was fun, dude. It was so fun. There were so many ways to play, and the cards were just so powerful. And I just love powerful cards that aren't haymakers.
Sure.
It's
Well,
my jam.
let's talk really quickly. So today we're going to talk about Naya Feather, a deck that you're piloting right now. Got you in the top 1,000 of Mythic this month so far. I'm really excited to get this one. Should we go right into the deck?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Awesome. So for the main deck, we have 4 Adanto Vanguard, 4 Dreadhorde Arcanist, 4 10th District Legionnaire, 4 Feather of the Redeemed, 4 Gruul Spellbreaker, 3 Gideon Blackblade, 3 Giant Growth, 2 Grid for Battle, 1 Sheltering Light, 1 Shock, 4 Domri's Ambush, 4 Collision Colossus. We have 22 lands in the form of 4 Clifftop Retreat, 1 Plains, 1 Rootbound Crag, 4 Sacred Foundry, 4 Stomping Grounds, 4 Sunpetal Grove, 4 Temple Garden. We have in our sideboard we have 1 more Sheltering Light, 2 more Shock, 1 Cindervine, 3 Lava Coil, 3 Tactile Honor Guard, 2 Tomic. I'm not going to get this guy's name right.
I
Distinguished
know, right?
Advocist,
Yeah, yeah.
1 more Gideon, 1 Tajic, and 1 Shalai. So, if we're talking about this first, what is your main way that you're trying to win with this deck, Smitty?
So this is an aggro deck. This metagame I'm really kind of stale on. It's not my favorite, the way it just snowballs and then people play like haymaker cards. Um, so I wanted to build an aggro deck, and that's what this is. Now it's kind of like a weird aggro deck though. It's not like it just wins by turn 4. It's kind of like a setup. I don't even know how to put it. But it's like you kind of set it up and just like get in like big damage. Like you can win in like kind of like 2-turn combo shot sometimes, or sometimes you just grind them out, or sometimes you have the creatures they can't remove and you just kind of win because they can never profitably block. So it's kind of like you're always attacking into air with this deck.
I think I've been playing this deck a little bit to prepare for the show. One of the most common things that I find myself doing, you play turn 2 Dreadhorde Arcanist, you play turn 3 Legionnaire with a giant growth on it. And then you attack, you get the giant growth back, and that's their big chunk of damage to start the game.
Right, yeah, like if you have if you have the ability to like do free damage with Feather, like you just use it that way. But generally then like you're holding it, right, until like you get value. Like sometimes the games can go even like 15 turns or 20 turns and you're still keeping up because like you've hit like Feather Gold or whatever. Like, so yeah, it's a weird deck. It really is a weird deck, and no 4-drops other than Shalai, but
that's you have
kind of a recent addition.
One 4-drop in the entire 75, and it's in the sideboard. One of the things that I noticed about this deck going in, we can talk about this card first, is Gruul Spellbreaker. A lot of the lists that we see that are feather lists are either straight, red, white, or Mardu. And this list is playing green, and when you play green, you get one of the best creatures in Standard in Gruul Spellbreaker.
Yep, you get and one of the best removal spells in Domri's Ambush, and I legit mean that. So like, you get Gruul Spellbreaker. That's like a shoo-in if you're playing red green. He's just too good for the meta, and like the whole meta is even like built around that. Is like the creature side of things that the creature side of decks, like it's all going to be based around Gruul Spellbreaker. So yeah, he's included. And then Domri's Ambush is absurd with Arcanist, and it's just like a good card anyways. Like Gideon and Spellbreaker become 5/5s, and so you can kill like any of the planeswalkers after like plussing essentially. And Arcanist, you 2-for-1, you can kill 2 like mana dorks or 2 whatever. It's such a good removal spell. So those 2 cards alone are why green is great. But then Collision Colossus is also great because it's a pump/removal spell. So like when your cards like double up like that, it's like crazy powerful. So anyways, that's why like I don't love Titanic Growth in here. I like the cards that like do 2 things. And so those are why green you could even do without, I would say, like Giant Growth and Titanic Growth. If maybe I need to explore that even.
So one of the things that I noticed when playing this deck it was actually a nombo that I wanted to talk about between playing Adanto Vanguard and Domri's Ambush in the same deck, due to the fact that Adanto only gets its power when it's attacking.
Yeah.
It does kind of anti-synergize with Ambush. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, but Adanto Vanguard was kind of a later find too, and I think Adanto's just necessary because you just need guys to stay on the board. We'll talk about it probably here in a minute, but the hardest matchup is Esper. Just like removal lists are very difficult. And so Vanguard helps combat that. And yeah, that's a non-bow, but sometimes just doing 2 damage with Domri's Ambush and that is fine. And then it's out of range of certain things, and like you can attack into 1/1 tokens easier or whatever. So like it's not the worst. But there's some like little awkwardness, but there's more synergy than there's not.
So let's talk about, you kind of mentioned Feather already. I already mentioned Dreadhorde Arcanist. Let's talk about those 2 cards and kind of, I mean, they're the keystone to this deck. Why don't you talk about those 2?
I'm sorry, what was the 2?
Dreadhorde Arcanist and Feather the Redeemed.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're the entire reasons. They're everything, man. They're just so strong. They're like 2 of the strongest on the aggro side of things, card wise, that can keep up with Teferis and all that. Although Arcanist is not very great if you're playing against Teferi decks.
Yeah, so. Arcanist has been one where I find I'm dealing a lot of damage really quickly if I have the right cards with it, and then depending on other things. But one thing that gets really good with Dreadhorde Arcanist is when you play that first Domri's Ambush on it.
Yeah, Ambush is absurd. Like, you're right. Like, sometimes it's awkward. That's why I like Shocks in here, too. Like, because they end up doing, like, 4 damage, right? Just because you buy them back. I don't know. There's just he's sometimes better late. Arcanist is, but yeah, Feather's good like all the time. I don't think there's any matchup I side them out like any number of them.
Is there so one of the things that I've really noticed in this deck is Gideon does a lot of work in the form of it gets in there, but also while you're pressuring your opponent, you're plussing it up, and it adds this like weird extra removal that you don't think that a deck like this would typically get. I've exiled a big Teferi with it. I've exiled a Liliana with it.
Yeah.
Just really getting extra value out of that minus ability. That when you go Adanto Vanguard into Gideon, it often feels like you can't lose.
Yeah, Gideon is like I have four of them in the 75 right now. I think the list I shipped you does. I can't quite remember. Anyways, he's just like a 4/4 indestructible card, and like that. Like once again, like Vanguard, you need a certain cards that like can't be removed. He's a creature that's so hard to remove against the right decks, and so yeah, he is a big time inclusion in this deck, and I think a big reason to play it.
What is your most common play pattern that you find yourself winning matches with this deck?
Turn 2 creature. Honestly doesn't really matter. I kind of like Vanguard most of the time. I think I'd lead with like Vanguard most of the time. And then the next turn, probably like another creature or attack. And if they're bad or whatever, they block, you just trample over them. You get like clean removal plus damage. And then like Gideon turn 3, let's say, lifelink and a Vanguard or whatever's out there. And then like turn 4, you're just either gonna probably win the game at that point or not, or it might go long. But turn 4 is like when you can either win or shut it down. Sometimes if like you're in a favorable position, but that's usually like 2 removal or like a creature plus a removal, or when I say removal, I mean like pump or a Domri's ambush or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
think that Collision Colossus, even on its pump side in this deck, acts as removal a lot. You have really high toughness creatures in the form of Arcanist and in the form of an indestructible Vanguard. Your toughness gets huge once you get your Legionnaire going. So the trample
yeah.
plus that toughness boost is usually a 2 mana removal spell plus damage.
Right, exactly. Like you're just getting all your cards are getting extra value. Like that's what you want all the time. Is like every card to get extra value, like scries or an extra +1/+1 or an extra damage or two, and like you just either chip them away or just take them in a couple big shots.
One of the things, I'm a huge Gruul proponent in this metagame. I think Gruul is one of the best decks. If you look across
Yeah.
the SCGs and things like that, it's just one of the decks that is constantly doing well. We didn't see a ton of it at the Mythic Championship. I'll be interested to talk about that this week on Constructive Criticism. But Gruul
Yeah.
Spellbreaker is one that you play very differently matchup dependent in Gruul. How do you find you play your Gruul Spellbreakers in this? Is it always haste? Is it always +4 plus? Is it always a 4/4? Does it matter on the matchup?
It's never always one way or another, but I find myself hasting a lot in here just because I want the damage in. Like I am thinking aggro, I am thinking attack, I am thinking like get them dead. But like I've started like the Oath of Kaya's or Kaya. Do you say Kaya or Kaya, by
I
the
say
way?
I say Kaya.
Kaya, I do too. Like Patrick Chapin and Mike Flores always say Kaya, and come on, bud, dude, it drives me crazy. Anyway, like if they have like 3 damage removal spells, I'll generally lean like the 4/4 side of things. But I mean, it's just versatile, right? So, but I find myself hasting probably more than +1/+1 in it
I
in
found that
this.
I found that too. Compared to Gruul, where I found myself making a 4/4 quite a bit
Right.
in Gruul. You have to play around removal. You have to be able to block or attack through 4 toughness creatures in that deck because every incremental advantage is so important. You don't have this way to push through as much damage as this deck. But between Giant Growth, Domri's Ambush, and Collision Colossus, I could afford to make 3/3s, get in the damage early, and then
Yeah.
worry about But since it already has Hexproof during my turn, I have so many pump spells. It was pretty
Yeah.
easy to consider making a 3/3.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. And like the fact that it's hexproof is so money in this deck. You can comfortably cast like your sorcery speed pump spells, or like I like Gird for battle more than I thought I would too.
It's really interesting because when you think about Gruul Spellbreaker in the Gruul deck, one of its most powerful things is it lets you resolve your spells, right? It has hexproof during your turn, so they have to answer it during their turn. It's this thing that they probably
Yeah.
want to answer because it's this huge threat. The same thing is true in this deck, except that you have instant speed effects in your
Yeah.
deck in this deck. So that means that if they're answering it during their turn, you have free reign to go in with your other creatures during their turn.
That's exactly right. And like this deck forces them to tap out a lot, especially turns like 2 through 5, and that's really good for us. Like that's also why I don't think this is like this deck is a dog to any one deck. Like if it draws well, which we do have some scribe, but it can draw pretty bad sometimes.
Well, let's talk about the mana really quick. We have 4 Clifftop Retreat, the 1 Plains, the 1 Rootbound Crag, the 4 Sacred Foundry, the 4 Stomping Grounds, 4 Sunpetal Grove, and the 4 Temple Garden. So this is a little bit different than the list that you actually
Yeah,
achieved Mythic with this month. And then also it's a little bit different.
pretty close.
Yeah, you cut a land recently, and the number of green red sources have gone down, but you still have that plains as the basic. So why don't we talk about the plains and the Rootbound Crag really quick?
Yeah, the plains is only to favor it towards the white side because I have any duel that includes white I have, then it needs just a little extra because we're rocking Gideon and Tomic and it's just heavy white. Like it's just heavy white.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
it was interesting
Feather,
as I was
Feather Gideon.
sorry about that. I
Oh,
was
you're
I was gonna say when I was building this deck on Arena and it was auto completing my lands, it was suggesting a forest just due to the pure number of sources
yeah.
for the deck. But to your point, when you think about like how thing you need your 2 drops, you have 4 Adanto Vanguard and 4 Legionnaire, and then you have double white out of the board plus you know to tile Honor Guard and Gideon. It's just a lot of white needed early specifically.
Yeah, so I see the deck is a white, it's a Boros shell, splash green. And like the green, you're only gonna need maybe 1 a turn, at most 2 a turn. And like a large majority of the time, the mana is pretty actually clean. But any 3-color deck, you are gonna lose some games to Mana Screw, and this one's no exception. It is a little awkward. But yeah, it just needed to lean white a little bit heavier, and I could some math whiz or an alchemist is a homie on Twitter that always looks at my mana bases and fixes them because he's got the maths down, dude. Maybe I'll have him look at it, but I don't know. It just needed to lean white a little more. So yeah, it's kind of like a white-red splash green deck.
I do find that I am losing games to not having green mana. Is this a deck that you're finding
Yeah.
yourself mulliganing pretty aggressively to like fix your mana?
If the shuffler wasn't broken and threw me a damn 2 lands every once in a while. No, I mean, like I end up mulliganing. I'm mostly joking, by the way. Mana is yeah, I don't know. You definitely I mulligan a lot in this deck, but it's not just like it's usually just not having enough mana. Like usually if I have like 2 mana of any kind, I'll almost snap keep it because it casts like almost everything and we just need to top deck 1 more land. So like it actually shouldn't mulligan a lot, but I don't know. I do find myself mulliganing a lot, but I don't think it's because of the land. I think it's just because I get really bad hands really often.
I also found myself mulliganing quite a bit. So and I think that once we have the new mulligan rule, this deck will actually be a lot better.
That's a good point. That'll be fun to see. Because do we get that on Arena soon?
Yeah,
Like,
we'll get it. We'll get it July 2nd.
oh snap! That's awesome, dude. I'm so hyped for that.
Yeah, and if you're in the, I think we're both in the streamer event
Yeah,
hashtag sponsored by Watsy. Are you in there as well?
Yes, I am sponsored.
Hashtag stack sponsored.
dude.
Yeah, so we'll both get to play with that on the 1st as well.
Oh, sick. Okay, I'm pumped. All right.
So
Sweet. Well, anyways, so yes, I do agree. I think any like aggro deck in this format, Gruul, and they're trying to combat that. I think with the mulligan rules and the scry lands and stuff coming up, because like they do need a little more just looking at the top of your deck, because aggro decks are very draw dependent and you don't have much control. Like this deck I like because it does kind of like to get value out of the cards, which is nice, and then extra value rather, and then some cards do have scry, so like there's some a little bit that helps clean out your draws, but yes, it is draw dependent. I think that's why it mulligans a lot too.
Cool. Well, what do you think, before we move on to the sideboard, what do you think the coolest interaction in this deck is? Like, what's the thing that's been, like, when you did it, you were like, I'm a genius?
You know what's funny is like you learn interactions, right? Just like after playing, like you don't even like see it all most of the time when you're building. But it's pretty simple actually. Just Domri's ambush on an Arcanist, make him a 2/4, kill a guy, attack. Now he's a 3/5. You killed another guy. Dude, they just the win percentage on that's like 98. It doesn't happen every game, obviously, but it's just so satisfying to like 2-for-1 and then have like this 3/5 that just rebuys all your spells the rest of the game. And then now Lava Coil doesn't kill it, and like I mean, there's just so much that doesn't kill it now. So that's just satisfying. It's simple and satisfying, but I love it.
Well, the sideboard we have 1 Sheltering Light, 2 Shock, 1 Cindervines, 3 Lava Coil, 3 Tactile Honor Guard, 2 Tomic, 1 Gideon, 1 Tajic, and 1 Shalai. Let's kind of talk about, how did you come up with the sideboard? Is there anything you want to call out really fast?
The sideboard is really just maintaining the balance of like pump or spells rather, and creatures, because there is like a super fine balance. Like you can't weigh this deck too far to one side or the other, or it doesn't like
Work?
it doesn't work right. Yeah, it doesn't work right. Like you should just be like Gruul then, or you should just be whatever. Anyways, no, I mean it's just kind of it's all over the place, but it has room, which is what I like. In fact, the Tecatlis I've recently considered cutting. I'm not sure they're the closest because there's not a whole lot of Jade Light being played right now. So we can kind of weigh it towards a certain way.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're playing. Arena is so ebb and flow. This card is really good when the Dreadhorde decks are really popular.
Yeah.
And then as they've waned, it's like, well, I don't need these if nobody's going to be casting, a
Yeah.
bunch of Wild Growth Walkers against me. But this deck would definitely suffer against Wild Growth Walker if you're not prepared for it.
Oh yeah, it would. I mean, you're gonna. Well, actually, that's not totally true. The thing is, we have so much removal. Like we demolish any other creature decks. Is what this deck does. Like it just will outrace any other creature deck.
Do you find that between Domri's Ambush and Colossus specifically, is that why you're not having trouble with the Wild Growth Walkers?
Exactly. Like they don't have creatures that are big enough to attack into ours necessarily. Like because we get ours to 5 toughness pretty easy. We have Domri's Ambush. We can attack if they want to block. Okay, if they don't, they're taking at least half their life, right? We have out of the sideboard. There's plenty of removal. There's just lots of removal in the list. Really, is what it comes down to. Like it, and then when you're killing their guys and your guys are pretty big and you can just win out of nowhere, like I don't know.
Cool.
You want creature decks, yeah.
That's helpful. Why don't you talk about kind of how your sideboard plan works against aggro with this sideboard?
Yeah, so aggro, let me pull it up really quick. Aggro is like you're bringing in the lava coils and shocks. You want just extra ways to remove them, right? I don't like Gideons on the draw because you want to be the aggressor. Like if you play Gideon first, they're gonna have a hard time answering him. But if you play him when they already have 2 guys on the board, he's not that great. So anyways, we do a lot of this sideboarding versus on the play and on the draw. Super important. But the shocks and like lava coils always come in, and then that's generally it against aggro, because you don't need a whole lot. We're already kind of favored, I think. And what I usually cut is just like I start shaving things like Collision, Colossus. Adanto Vanguard is a card I do not like on the draw against other aggro cards, and like Gird for battle, or I might even shave like a Gird or Titanic Growth kind of thing. So anyways, there's only a few key cards that are like good or not. Like I don't like Gideon and Adanto versus aggro on the draw. But we always want like shocks and lava coils in.
Cool, that's helpful. I also think that Grid for Battle is not exactly where I want to be against the aggro deck, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Do you board in Honor Guard against Mono Red with this deck?
I probably, you know what? I have not faced a lot of mono red. Like I said, in my entire journey to Mythic, I've maybe faced it like one time. Which is odd because I'm not even sure what the matchup is. I feel like it would be okay though. I probably would. Yes, yeah, I probably would. Just the 1/3 body, oftentimes is
Yeah,
all I want.
being able to block and also stop just Pyromancer by itself might convince me that it's correct.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yep,
Cool.
I would probably do.
So, against control, you have kind of a lot of different style of options. You have your Sheltering Light, you have your Cinder Vines, you got your Tajic, you got your Gideon, you got your Shalai. What mix of
Yeah.
those cards, maybe even Shock, depending on the matchup, to kill Planeswalkers? Maybe you don't need that because of Domri's Ambush, but kind of how are you approaching those control matchups?
Yeah, control matchup tends to be the toughest. If they lean like heavy Esper, like removal kind of Esper, it's even tougher. So we want to bring in Gideons. We want the full set of Gideons in. And we want usually I do bring in a Shalai, though it is slow and it's often you just want enough threats to where they can't answer them all, and it's tough. Like I will bring in Sheltering Light if they have a lot of removal, and you'll usually be cutting things like Gird for battle. I will actually shave a Domri's Ambush against control, even though it does hit Planeswalkers. We do want it still. Titanic Growth, like a lot of the pump spells that they could two for one, you potentially four. And we just want creatures. Like we want Adanto all the time, and we want Gideon. So it's the opposite of the aggro. Those are the really two key cards, like for the meta.
So
They're kind of meta
one of the things
constructs.
I noticed playing this deck, is just how bad this deck is against Thought Erasure. Um,
It can hurt. Yeah, it
so,
can hurt.
do you find that you want to be threat heavy more so than spell heavy against those the erasure
Yes,
decks? Be-
exactly, exactly.
and the thing is with so many decks that you play, you want to be spell heavy against Thought Erasure because your spells are high impact, but your spells are actually low impact in this deck.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. It's totally true. You just want creatures, 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 and like you want the Gideons and Adantos because they're gonna have to spend more cards or find more specific cards to answer them. So yes, that's why you'll often cut a lot of the pump spells and all that, and just go creatures, just bash with creatures and pray to the magic gods.
So we have mid range up next as the thing to talk about with your sideboard. Here we might be talking about Gruul, we might be talking about Sultai, Dreadhorde. What are you? Maybe even some of the Bant ramp decks. Like, how do you kind of
Yeah,
approach those different style of mid range decks?
it's tough because they're all a little bit different, right? Like Tocatli comes in probably against some of those. See, those ones I like the pump. I don't love Adanto Vanguard again, even in the mid range, because like they have a lot of 4 toughness creatures like Gruul Spellbreaker and stuff. And so, yeah, you can get it to 4, but like on its own, it's potentially not very good. Um, Same with Gideon. Like those 2 cards are the ones you're often looking at come in or out. Uh, but it's kind of a judgment call. Like it really is. Like if they use a lot of mana dorks to get to Nissa, I still want all the shocks and lava coils. Um, I mean, pretty basic strategies overall. You just have to make kind of the judgment call. Like if there's mana dorks or a deck that's going to go faster than you, shocks and lava coils, that's what they're there for.
Sure.
And then the other cards are kind of like pieced together like that. Like Cinder Vines, we sometimes need like if they Ixalan's Binding or Gideon's pretty bad kind of thing. So I
The
don't know.
the,
It's judgment calls,
there's kind of 2 or 3 cards we haven't talked about. We have the Tomix, the Tajic, and the Shalai, and
right?
the Cindervines. What are those for?
The Cindervines is specifically just for Ixalan's Binding's been around a little bit. The Tomic is for anytime you see Nissa, you just bring those in. And then the Tajic is again just to make it like when you're taking out a bunch of pump, you want more creatures. It's like that extra spot. But I want haste guys in this deck to answer the planeswalkers too. And he has some synergy with like Arcanist. Anyways, Tajic is just kind of like that balancing act, and another decent creature for the deck. So yeah, I mean, there's just little pinpoint little how am I trying to say it, pinpoint answers.
So Cindervines is one that was really interesting to me as we look at the Mythic Invitational or the Mythic Championship this weekend. We saw a significant
Yeah,
uptick in uh, in Nexus of Fate decks, making me want more Cinder Vines for this deck.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. If we see it more Cindervines will come in because that card just I love that card. It's such a good strong answer to those decks. Like the one damage constantly, and then they just can't ever stick the reclamation. So yep, I'm with you.
Cool. Well, anything else you want to talk about the sideboard before we talk about your journey to Mythic?
No, the sideboard isn't like yeah, it just I love the main deck. Sometimes I almost just want to click again, you know, and just like say I can beat this with the same 60. Like, let's go.
Sure.
So no, I'm not terribly attached to this sideboard, and like you know, the meta changes and that sideboard will change too. But the main core of the deck, I think, can stick around.
So when we think about kind of your journey to Mythic this month, what were some of the decks that you were playing against to get that top 1,000 rank?
Yeah, what did I play against a lot? A lot of planeswalkers. I did not run into a lot of mono red. I ran into some mono white in the end, and this deck crushes mono white. Like it really does, which is nice because most decks I build do not. Funny enough. I played against a lot of just Esper and Jeskai and just some Sultai, but not like I did not run into a lot of Command the Dreadhordes. It's weird. It was a weird meta, but like I didn't get I got to Diamond like a couple weeks ago, and then I hadn't really been playing, and then one day I just got on and I hit a win streak and just kind of like got through Diamond in a night or two, it felt like, or maybe 2 days or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, a little all over the place. A lot of those walker decks, though. Now I am noticing in Mythic, there's a lot of like Esper Planeswalker and Esper removal decks, and this deck is a tough thing right now. Like we might need to sway it heavily towards those and see. Yeah.
I was playing this deck last night. Played against Esper 5 times in just platinum. So
sorry, bro. No wonder you had a rough go, dude. That's why we got Adanto and Gideon.
Yeah,
and like
Adanto
I don't
helps.
know. Do you have any ideas for like one other really strong card against them? It's tough. I need to find one more though, and we need to make sure that's in the 75 because I think we can. It's almost there. It's not like a dog to anything. I don't feel like, but Esper can definitely be tough, and it is a main gig right now. So
yeah, I would think that what you're really looking for in the Esper matchup is high impact cards at medium to low costs. So you need, it's possible your ultimate plan. I mean, it's hard. I did have somebody cast an Elder Spell against me, which was really interesting. I was like, man, if they're keeping Elder Spell in for this Gideon, like getting different things is going to be really tough. But it could just be that you need, things more like Mortialize and stuff like that. The problem is like none of your cards are very good outside of Adanto Vanguard against Kaya's Wrath, and so
right.
and
well, and that's why we have that indestructible spell. It's like one of the only reasons, right?
Yeah. So
cast downs around.
It's something that I would need to think about more, but I certainly did not feel favored in that matchup specifically. Was there anything else that you tried on your way to Mythic this month that you either liked or really didn't like?
There was I really don't like the meta, and I apologize for people that do.
That's okay. I also don't like the standard formats for what it's worth, so
yeah, so I've been playing that mono green friends list. Have you seen that?
Is that the Tron deck?
Yeah, the Karn. It uses both Karns, Nissa, and Ugins, and like plane wide celebration.
Yep.
I was like playing and tweaking on that because like that list was kind of cool and fun. So, but that was it. Like those were the only literal 2 decks I played. Yep, those are the only 2 decks I played the entire run.
And you said that this deck is the one that took you away there. It was really quick. You just played a bunch of matches, played against a mono white, smashed it, and got to Mythic pretty quick.
Yep. I mean, it was like I just hit like some days I sit down with this deck and I just run, dude. Like go so hard, like and it just wins, dude. And then like sometimes you're right, it'll be pretty average. It'll just do the 50-50 thing, like but yeah, it just flew me there like in a day or two. So I don't know sometimes if it's like the meta shifts or if it's the time of day I play or or what, but like sometimes things just work. Like the hands, I'm like, I got mixes of things. I got lands and some spells and creatures, and like then when I'm losing, it's like I can't draw a second land. It's crazy, dude.
Sure.
So, anyways.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today. If you have any questions about this deck, hit up Smitty. He's at SMI77Y. That's Smitty on Twitter. And yeah, man, it means a lot to me for you to come on and talk about this deck with me. If you want to find me, you can find me at Spencer 38. You can find the podcast at CCMTG. Or no, wow, that's not even the right podcast. I'm so used to that after five years. You can you can find this podcast at Arena Mythic Cast. It's part of the CCMTG network, where you can find constructive criticism, common knowledge, tons of podcasts about getting better at Magic the Gathering, and yeah, it means a lot to everybody listening to this first episode. Don't hesitate to give us feedback. Thank you so much, Smitty, for coming on. Why don't you plug your stream really fast for me?
Hey man, thanks for having me. First of all, I really appreciate it, especially as the first guest. My Twitch, which I haven't been streaming a whole lot, and I apologize to people who have subscribed, but occasionally I do pop on twitch.tv/Smitty, SMI77Y.
Yeah, man. I hope to see you streaming more. You're one of my favorite creators. Once again, thank you everybody so much for listening, and we'll talk to everybody next week with a brand new Mythic Cast.